All right, so here are the 7-6 homework solutions. So first thing we're going to do in any one of these problems is we're going to factor our denominator and numerator if it needs to be so that we can determine our domain. Remember, anything that comes out of the denominator breaks our domain, whether it's a point of exclusion or a vertical asymptote, doesn't matter. Next thing, I'm going to make a sign pattern of my original function so that I know when I'm above the x-axis and beneath the x-axis. And then the last little thing that's going to help us out is I'm going to need my horizontal asymptote. And since the degree in the numerator is smaller than the degree in the denominator, I know that horizontal asymptote is at 0. I trace my key values, my vertical asymptote, my 0, my other vertical asymptote, my horizontal asymptote, and then I look at my sign pattern. Before -5, our graph is beneath the x-axis. Between -5 and 0, it's above the x-axis. Between 0 and 1, we're beneath the x-axis, and then we finish by being above the x-axis. So as you can see, we've crossed our horizontal asymptote, which means that most of the time, our range is going to be all real numbers, especially since I don't have a point of exclusion. And then from there, I simply list my values. Again, we're going to start by factoring our numerator and denominator. I can see that I'm going to have a point of exclusion at 1. Again, as we discussed in class, putting your point of exclusion on the sign pattern is almost more of a reminder to break up the domain with that point of exclusion, but really probably not all that necessary. Since my degrees are equal and my lead coefficients are 1 and 1, I know that I have a horizontal asymptote at 1. So I sketch my key values, vertical asymptote, horizontal asymptote, took the time to find my y-coordinate of the point of exclusion by substituting into x plus 1 and x plus 3, my 0, and then again, I'm above the x-axis, beneath the x-axis, above and above. This time I do not cross my horizontal asymptote, and I've got a point of exclusion, so notice those values break up my range. And then from there, it's just a matter of listing our values. Number 7. So again, I factor my numerator and denominator. I have another point of exclusion. I make my sign pattern. Find my horizontal asymptote to be at 1, since my degrees are equal, and my lead coefficients would be 1 over 1. And so I place my key values. Based on my sign pattern, I know I need to be above the x-axis before -2, beneath the x-axis, above the x-axis, and above the x-axis. I'm able to sketch my graph. Once again, I have a point of exclusion and a horizontal asymptote that I did not cross, and so those are going to break up my range. Number 9, we've got a slant asymptote. I've waited to actually draw this graph so that we can do this together. I used my calculator to find the values from my numerator, and I can see that I'm going to have a point of exclusion. So I make my sign pattern, do my long division to come up with my horizontal asymptote, and I start graphing. So I've got my 0, I've got my POE, I've got my other 0, and since my slant asymptote was at x minus 3, I know that I'm going to have a y-intercept for that slant asymptote down at -3, and then I would go up 1 and to the right 1, and now I'm able to sketch my horizontal asymptote. I look at my values, and so I know that my values before -5 have negative values, they're beneath the x-axis, so I know I'm going to draw here and not over here. If I drew where the question mark was, I would end up with another 0. And I know that there is no other 0 to that side, so I don't draw on that portion of my graph. Between -5 and -4, we're above the x-axis, and that makes sense for following these asymptotes because I'm going to hit that 0, drop beneath the x-axis to connect with my POE, continue beneath the x-axis to my next 0, and follow above. Similar to what I said about the last one, I know that I'm not over here in any place because if I was, my graph would have to follow these asymptotes and I would end up with an extra 0, and I do not have a 0 over there. sorry, I didn't do the range in that last one. So my range is going to be a little bit tricky in that I don't know what these coordinates are. So we're going to go ahead and just give them arbitrary values. We'll call this x sub 1, y sub 1 for whatever this maximum is. We'll call this x sub 2, y sub 2 for whatever that minimum is. And so my range would start at negative infinity and go up until y sub 1. After that, there's this gap between, sorry, let me draw that a little bit better. There's this gap between these 2 points, so my range isn't going to start again until I get to y sub 2 and then go off towards infinity. And finally, number 12, again, factor your numerator, factor your denominator. Whether you factor out the negative from that x and make it x minus 5, that's up to you. Set up our sign pattern. And I know I have a horizontal asymptote at -1 because the degrees are equal, and my lead coefficients would be -1/1. Notice our vertical asymptote is a double value, which means my sign will not change on the sign pattern of the original. And testing my values showed that. All right, I sketch my key values. I've got my vertical asymptote, my 2 zeros, my horizontal asymptote at -1. My graph is beneath the x-axis before 0, above the x-axis after 0, above the x-axis between 2 and 5, beneath the x-axis after 5. And so my range starts at -1 and goes off towards infinity because I don't cross that horizontal asymptote. All right, hopefully this helps. Definitely, if you have questions, feel free to ask in class.